Hello! I've had this set of pencils for quite a long time and they've been sitting in my stash awaiting their turn to be filmed. I am finally getting around to that today, yay! This is a set of 6 Pitt graphite pencils that are matte. I have never used them before. I'm going to do a drawing with them today and compare them with regular graphite pencils. We'll see if they're any different. Let's get into it! So basically the idea of these pencils is that they are matte and they won't shine the way that graphite does. If you do a lot of pencil drawings, you'll find that when you move the paper you'll get a distinctive graphite sheen on them, even with really dark ones. But apparently these ones don't do that, and I'm really curious to see how well they actually work. Look at these. They're brand new. I have never used them. I haven't even swatched them to try them out. I just bought it because I thought it would be fun to test these eventually. So they come in a set of 6 here. I think there is a larger set as well, but I just decided to get this smaller one because these are the ones that I would normally use. The higher the number, the softer the lead of the pencil and the darker it becomes. So we have 2B, 4B, 6B, 8B, 10B, and a really dark 12B, which a lot of pencil tins don't go up to that. Usually they will go up to either an 8B, sometimes a 10B, but 12B and higher is only something that has recently started coming in with pencils, and the darker they are, the better as far as I'm concerned, but it's also good to have some lighter ones. So 2B is a harder pencil, but it's still relatively soft, and then they just get softer as they go up. Otherwise, it's just a pretty standard looking pencil, but you could see that this lead looks a lot darker than a regular graphite pencil, and I have one of those for comparison. I had hoped to actually use the Faber Castell 9000 pencils, which is their standard graphite set, but I realised that I only have them in this chunky size, so I've got 4 chunky boys here. In the regular graphites, this is a Faber Castell 9000 Jumbo, so I'm not going to use them today because I think that the size of them is going to impede my drawing ability a little bit, but we'll just take a look at one for the colour of the pencil graphite lead. What I will do is find one that's a direct comparison. So we've got this 8B here, and I'll find the 8B in this one. You could probably see on the jumbo one that it looks a lot more silver and shiny, whereas this matte one is much darker. It's more of a black colour graphite. And so already, just without even using them, I can see a noticeable difference just in the colour of that graphite. I'm going to move these to one side, and I have some other standard size pencils. I might have to use these chunky boys in their own separate drawing though at some point. My graphite pencil of choice is the Staedtler Mars Lumograph. I've always really loved these pencils. You can see I've used some of them quite considerably over on this side. That's these same dark ones here. And in this set I've got up to a 9B, but they did release some extra ones, and I think you can actually buy an even bigger tin now, but I'm not going to do that because I have plenty of pencils in here. Most of them have not even been used, and we do have an 8B once more, which is this one. So even on these 2 pencils you could see that the Mars Lumograph has that much shinier and greyer graphite lead compared to this one, which is much darker. Hey, I found them! I also have 10, 11 and 12B, which is perfect because now I can directly compare these pencils with each other. So the 12Bs! Here they are side by side. These are the darkest pencils in both sets, and you could see even with these ones that this one is slightly grayer than this one. So I'm going to do a direct comparison with the 2 types of graphites, and we'll see if these ones are matte and if they don't reflect the way that these graphite pencils do. And I know this because I've done previous graphite drawings and had real issues with my studio lights, so it'll be really interesting to see how much shinier these ones will be over these new matte ones. I hope I've explained that well enough. It's really hot today. So here's the reference image I'm going to use, and my printer has decided to do something really weird. I'm going to have to recalibrate it all. That's so annoying, and I really don't want to have to print this again, so I'm just going to leave it like this. I do actually have this image on my phone as well, so I'll be referring to my phone for the most part. I just thought I'd print this out so I can kind of trace those eyes a little bit and not have to worry about drawing them and making them symmetrical. Half of it's going to be with the Staedtler Mars standard graphites, graphites, and half of it's going to be with the Pitt graphite pencils. This is something that's relatively symmetrical, so hopefully that will be a good indicator. I have some Bristol paper, but I think it's a bit too smooth, so I'm going to go for this Canson illustration manga paper that I have, 250 GSM. It's got a bit of tooth, but it's still relatively smooth, and I think I want to be able to use a fair bit of layering so that I can really test out these dark pencils. Before I get drawing, I remembered at the last minute to actually swatch the pencils, so I'm just going to use exactly the same pencils in the regular set as I am with the matte ones, starting with 2B and working my way up. Already I'm noticing a difference, and I don't know if you can, but I will be talking more about it during the drawing. You could probably see a little bit that the regular graphite is looking a bit shinier, so I'll show this in a moment once I finish swatching these last few pencils. I'm glad I have the same numbers in each set that I can do a direct comparison for you, especially with that darkest 12B. So I'll lift them up and hold them out of the direct light, and you can see that they look pretty similar, but when I start reflecting them under the studio lights, that regular graphite is so much shinier than the matte graphite. It's significantly different, but when I hold them side by side, they look pretty much identical in darkness, and that just shows that the matte graphite pencils are pretty much the same as regular graphite, even though they look darker when I'm holding up the pencil leads to the camera earlier. But I'm going to show it more in a drawing, and first up I'm just going to give it a really light trace using a 5H pencil, so a hard one, just to get a really light outline, and this will save me a lot of time when it comes to making sure the eyes are in proportion with each other. As I said, it was very hot this day and I was just not in the mood to have to draw from scratch, so a little bit of cheating here, but it just cuts a lot of time with this step out doing the actual drawing. And now I'm going in firstly with the left hand side, which is the matte graphite pencils, and I'd put little labels up the top, but I put them too high and so you won't even be able to see them for the majority of the drawing. Really clever, Becky. But anyway, I had considered working on one side and finishing it and then moving to the other, but I thought it would be easier to compare the differences by doing the drawing kind of simultaneously, so I worked on the left hand side and then I'd go over to the right using the two different kinds of pencils so that it's a little bit easier to see how they function. And first up I'm just doing a really light drawing with the 2B, which is the hardest pencil in both sets, and there is already a noticeable difference with the way they handle. The blue Staedtler Mars that I'm using now are much smoother than the matte pencils, like the graphite glides so much more, and that's probably why it's a lot shinier. I used a cotton bud to blend out some of the pencil just to see how they work. I totally forgot to switch cotton buds there, but for the rest of it I had one bud for each side of the drawing. And the matte pencils smudge quite nicely. I was expecting them to not work as well as the regular graphite, but they were pretty much the same. I'd say regular graphite smudges slightly more than the matte. I went from a 2B to a 12B for the pupils and other parts of the eye. You can see how much darker 12B is compared to 2B, and I'm not using a lot of pressure here. I was keeping it fairly light so that I didn't squish the paper or make marks in it. Just building up layers slowly and then blending some of the pencil as well. I also got a kneaded eraser in a while just to take off some of the smudges that I'd made that I didn't want to have. I've got one of those tiny Tombow erasers somewhere, but do you think I could find it for this drawing? No. Anyway, I'm switching back over to regular graphite, and I'm also using the 12B pencil here. So the eyes actually look quite different from each other, and that's generally because people's eyes are not exactly symmetrical. There are differences. One eye is actually slightly bigger than the other, I think, when I was looking at it more closely. Either that or I've drawn one eye bigger than the other, even though I traced the outline. So I think it is just that this right-hand side is a tiny bit bigger. Otherwise, I tried really hard to keep the pencil pressure the same on both sides of the drawing so I could get it as accurately represented as possible when it comes to comparing them. I've just got a piece of paper covering that right eye because my hand kept going over the top and I would have smudged all of that much darker graphite very quickly. The matte pencils worked nicely, they kept a sharp point, and they smudged well and also blended well, but I did notice that they are quite rough to use. Like when I'm using these graphites on the right hand side, it's like they're almost quite slippery on the paper, and it made it just a little bit harder to control them, which was interesting. I had more control with the matte pencils, but the regular graphite feels a lot nicer to use, probably because it does glide. Oh, I had a little bit of blurriness here, sorry about that, but it will come back in a moment. Eyebrows are just so difficult to draw. I tried really hard to make them look fairly realistic. I don't know how well I succeeded, but I think both eyebrows on either side are fairly comparable to each other. I shaded them and blended the eyebrows a bit just to get a darker value and make them look a bit more realistic, because you wouldn't have white paper showing underneath. And here I am repeating this process with the other graphite pencils. Kind of got there in the end. But it looks like the right hand side is a lot lighter than the left hand side, and I can assure you it's not because I'm drawing lighter, it is the studio lights reflecting across that paper that's making the regular graphite look a lot lighter. And the last thing I did with this drawing is fill in the eyelashes, which brings the whole thing together. Eyelashes are also really difficult because they don't all go in one direction, they tend to cross over each other, and putting them in the correct location on the eye is quite challenging. I forgot a little bit on the right hand side, and I think I made a little bit of a mess, especially with the lower eyelash line, but I did end up fixing it up eventually. It looks so easy when I'm speeding this up, but this actually took me quite a long time to draw, and I accidentally drew those lashes coming out of the eyeball rather than along the lash line, so I rubbed it out and fixed it up. I don't think it's too noticeable. But as I finish up this little drawing, I decided not to do the hood around her face. I hope you can see that there is a difference between the left and the right hand side. I'll show this a little bit more once I lift up the paper and reflect it into the light, but just giving a few little finishing touches here and I'll sign it off. And here's a finished drawing. This is the regular graphite and this is the matte. This side looks lighter, and that is because the light is really reflecting off it. If I just tilt it a bit so that the light is off, you can see that I have used pretty much the same darkness for both sides. It's just that when you tilt it into the light, look how much more that regular graphite is reflecting, and especially in the pupil area, whereas the matte is staying pretty much as advertised, totally matte. It's not really reflecting in the light at all. So it is interesting to see that noticeable difference between them, and these matte ones really are actually matte, so that's good to know that they are living up to their name. So which do I prefer? Well, I still really love my Mars Lumograph pencils. They are so smooth and they glide on like a dream. It's really hard to explain it, but it's like just really silky feeling, and it's so easy to get marks onto a page very quickly. Whereas the matte ones are grippier. They don't slide across the paper as nicely. There's kind of a almost jerking motion, like I could feel a friction to them. They feel drier than the regular graphite pencils. But having said that, these matte pencils are most excellent for filming when I have studio lights above me, so I probably will use these quite a lot for filming purposes because they just show up so much better, and I don't have all this shininess that I get from my regular graphites. So if you are doing any kind of filming or anything where light is going to reflect off your graphite, I think these matte pencils are definitely worth getting, just so that you can get that really flat look but still have pretty much an identical graphite look to the other ones when it comes to darkness. There it is when there's no light shining on it. The other thing I noticed is that because these are harder, they keep their points for longer, and I've barely used any when I put them back in the tin, whereas the regular graphite do tend to wear down more easily, and so I did have to sharpen them a few times. It's really difficult to sharpen the 12B because it's so soft, and that's why it has a slightly blunter point, because I just can never get a sharp point on it without taking half the pencil with it. So they're worth trying out. I don't know if you can buy them as singles, but I mean, a box of 6 isn't probably going to cost too much. I'll link them in the description below if I can find them again, because I bought these ages ago, and you might want to check them out for yourself. But at least you could see in this video just how much more matte they really are, and they don't have that regular graphite sheen. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this video was helpful and it gave you an idea as to what these matte pencils are like. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, and you might want to click that subscribe button for more videos. I'll have a couple of other videos up here for you to watch as well. And in the meantime, I hope you're having a fantastic day. I'll see you all again really soon in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye!